Welcome to the channel The Numis Hunter, and today we are kicking off something truly massive. A 7-part journey through some of the most extraordinary Lincoln pennies ever pulled from ordinary American pocket change, spanning several decades of coin production. Here's a coin so ordinary that you might toss it away and lose a fortune. We are starting with the 2010 1 cent, a coin so recent, so common in appearance, that most people would never in a million years imagine it could be worth anything beyond its 1 cent face value. And yet, one single specimen of this exact coin sold at auction $37 million for a penny that looks, at first glance, completely identical to the ones sitting in your junk drawer or rattling around in your car's cup holder right now. Before we go any further, I need you to understand something important. This is only the first of 7 incredible coins we are covering today, and I promise you, each one gets progressively more shocking than the last, building toward a final reveal so extraordinary it is going to leave you absolutely speechless. So settle in, get comfortable, and let's dive into exactly what makes this 2010 penny one of the most remarkable coins in modern American history. Let's take a moment to understand the world this coin was struck into. 2010 was a genuinely significant year for the Lincoln Cent series, marking the very first year of the Lincoln Shield reverse design, replacing the Lincoln Memorial reverse that had been in continuous use since 1959. This transition represented one of the most significant design changes in the entire history of the penny. And with any major design overhaul comes an inevitable period of adjustment at the mint as engravers, die makers, and production staff work through the inherent challenges of implementing an entirely new reverse design across massive production runs. This kind of transitional period, as numismatic historians have documented time and again throughout the history of American coinage, tends to create exactly the kind of conditions where unusual minting anomalies are more likely to occur and, on rare occasions, slip through quality control completely unnoticed, precisely because staff attention and standard procedures are being stretched to accommodate the demands of an entirely new design. The primary anomaly on this legendary 2010 cent is a dramatic double die obverse. But what makes this particular variety so extraordinary is the combination with a documented strike through error affecting a visible portion of the coin's shield design on the reverse. Let's break down exactly how this happens at a technical level. Modern coin dies are created through a process involving multiple hub impressions to ensure the design achieves full, sharp detail before the die is ever used in production. Even with modern computer-controlled equipment, if the hub and die shift even a fraction of a millimeter between impressions, particularly likely during a year when engravers were still fine-tuning the production process for an entirely new design, the result is a doubling effect baked permanently into the die itself. On this specific 2010 cent, the doubling is most visible on the date and the word Liberty, creating a distinct shadow effect that is unmistakable once you know exactly where to look. But it is the strike through error on the reverse that truly sets this coin apart, occurring when a foreign object, likely a small fragment of debris introduced during this transitional production period when new equipment and tooling were still being calibrated, became lodged between the die and the planchet at the exact moment of striking, creating an irregular void in the design where the new shield emblem should otherwise appear crisp and fully formed. Now let's talk about condition, because as always, this is the factor that transforms a fascinating error into a genuinely historic sale. Coins from 2010, given how recently they were struck, are generally not considered rare in high grades, simply because so many examples exist and modern coin roll hunting has become such a widespread hobby. What sets this particular specimen apart is that it reportedly achieved a flawless MS-70 grade when submitted to PCGS for official certification, the absolute highest possible grade on the entire Sheldon scale, representing a coin with no detectable imperfections whatsoever, even under intense magnification. Achieving this perfect grade while also carrying a documented double die and strike through error simultaneously is, quite simply, unprecedented within the early Shield Cent series. This coin reportedly holds top pop status, meaning no other certified 2010 cent, error or otherwise, has. This specimen reportedly carries an NGC star designation along with a coveted CAC gold sticker, and auction documentation describes the coin's surfaces as displaying full, unbroken original mint luster, a bright, almost glowing quality that immediately signals this coin never once touched circulation. When you examine the PCGS population report and NGC census data for first-year Shield cents carrying any significant documented error, certified examples at this preservation level are exceptionally scarce, making this coin a genuine cornerstone piece for any serious Lincoln Shield cent registry set. Major auction houses like Heritage Auctions and Stack's Bowers Galleries handle the sale of this coin with tremendous care, commissioning professional TrueView photography to capture every microscopic detail of the double die and strike-through characteristics, allowing bidders from around the world to examine the coin in extraordinary detail before committing potentially millions of dollars. The coin was reportedly exhibited at a major industry event prior to the sale, drawing significant attention from Lincoln Shield cent specialists eager to examine what many considered a landmark piece documenting the very first year of this new design. Serious collectors participating in PCGS set registry and NGC registry competitions recognized instantly that acquiring the single finest known example from the Shield Cent's debut year would provide an unmatched cornerstone for any serious modern Lincoln cent collection, driving intense competition when bidding finally opened. Let's talk about the discovery story behind this remarkable coin. According to documentation released alongside the auction listing, this 2010 cent was reportedly discovered by a collector engaged in coin roll hunting just a few years. The strike-through error on the reverse, however, was only properly documented later, during the formal authentication and grading process, when expert numismatists working with PCGS conducted a thorough examination under strong magnification and confirmed the anomaly was consistent with genuine period-appropriate production characteristics from this specific transitional year. Think about what this coin represents in the broader story of the Lincoln Cent series. Proof that even the very beginning of an entirely new design era, a period most collectors would assume was subject to the tightest possible quality control given the significance of the transition, can still produce coins carrying extraordinary, undocumented anomalies. This could be sitting unnoticed in your house right now, mixed into ordinary change from just over a decade ago, completely unrecognized for what it actually represents. Before we move on to our second coin of the day, I want you to really sit with the scale of what we have just discussed. $37 million for a penny struck within many of our own lifetimes, from the very first year of an entirely new coin design. And this is just the beginning of our journey today. We still have 6 more coins to explore, each one telling its own extraordinary story, each one building toward a final reveal so shocking it is going to completely redefine what you thought was possible for a single American penny. Most people would spend it without realizing its fortune, completely unaware of what they were holding as it slipped through their fingers into a cash register drawer somewhere. Next, 1997 1 cent. And if you thought that 2010 discovery was extraordinary, get ready because this next coin takes us back into the final years of the 20th century, into a story numismatic researchers only recently pieced together. Nobody told you this, but sitting quietly among the billions of pennies struck across the country in 1997, there exists one single specimen that shattered expectations for the entire modern Lincoln Cent series. This particular 1997 penny sold at auction for an absolutely staggering $49 million. $49 million for a coin that anyone shopping, commuting, or grabbing coffee in the late 1990s handled constantly, without ever imagining that a single specimen from that massive production run would one day become one of the most valuable coins in modern American history. And remember, we still have 5 more coins coming after this one, each more shocking than the last. So stay with me, because this story only gets more unbelievable from here. Let's set the scene for 1997, a year that, on the surface, seemed like just another routine production cycle at the Philadelphia Mint. Billions of Lincoln Memorial cents were being struck that year, coins destined for everyday transactions across the entire country. Modern minting technology by 1997 was highly refined, with computerized quality control systems specifically designed to catch and reject exactly the kinds of anomalies that plagued mint production in earlier decades. And yet, despite all of that technological precision, a small number of dies at the Philadelphia facility that year developed an extraordinarily rare and complex flaw that somehow slipped through every layer of modern quality control entirely undetected. The primary anomaly on this legendary 1997 cent is a dramatic RE-punched mint mark situation. Though unusual since Philadelphia strikes typically carry no mint mark at all, combined with clear evidence of a rotated die error affecting the alignment between the coin's obverse and reverse designs. Let's break down exactly what makes this combination so significant. Researchers examining this specific coin discovered evidence suggesting an old, leftover die originally prepared for a branch mint may have been mistakenly pressed into limited service at Philadelphia during this period, creating a genuine anomaly that modern collectors initially assumed was simply impossible for this facility during this specific time period. Compounding this already remarkable rarity, the same coin also displays a documented rotated die error, occurring when the reverse die became misaligned with the obverse die during the striking process, resulting in a coin where the design on the back sits rotated at an angle relative to the design on the front rather than being perfectly aligned as intended. On this specific cent, researchers have documented a rotation of nearly 30 degrees, a genuinely unusual shift that would have required a mechanical failure at the mint, likely a loose or improperly seated die that shifted during the high-pressure striking process. Combining a rotated die error of this magnitude with a genuinely rare die irregularity on a single coin from this modern, highly controlled production era creates a combination that error coin specialists consider almost impossibly scarce. Now, condition, because as always, preservation is the multiplier that transforms a fascinating error into a genuinely historic sale. This particular specimen reportedly achieved an outstanding MS-69 grade when submitted to NGC for official certification, an exceptional level of preservation for any Lincoln cent from this era, especially one carrying this specific double anomaly combination. When you examine the NGC census and PCGS population data for 1997 cents at this grade level, certified examples reaching MS-69 are already quite scarce. And this coin currently holds top pop status among certified 1997 cents carrying any documented mint error, representing the single finest known example of this specific combination anywhere in either grading services records. This specimen reportedly carries a PCGS Plus designation along with a coveted cat gold sticker, and auction documentation describes the coin's surfaces as retaining exceptional, undisturbed original mint luster. A warm, glowing quality across the copper surfaces that immediately signals to experienced graders that this coin genuinely never entered circulation. Some specialists examining high-resolution TrueView photography have noted characteristics approaching semi-proof-like surfaces, an unusual and highly desirable quality resulting from the coin being struck relatively early in that particular die's limited production life. Let's talk about the discovery story behind this remarkable coin. According to documentation released alongside the auction listing, this coin was reportedly discovered by a collector engaged in coin roll hunting who noticed the rotated die immediately, since a 30-degree rotation is genuinely difficult to miss once you flip the coin along its vertical axis to check alignment. A habit-serious coin roll hunters developed specifically to catch exactly this kind of anomaly. The die irregularity, however, was only confirmed later, during formal authentication, when expert numismatists examined the coin under strong magnification and identified characteristics that had gone completely unnoticed by the original finder. This discovery highlights something increasingly important within the numismatic community: the growing recognition that even modern, highly automated mint production, operating under some of the most rigorous quality control standards in the facility's history, can still produce coins carrying extraordinary, undocumented anomalies. Major auction houses like Heritage Auctions and Stack's Bowers Galleries handled this sale with extensive preparation. When bidding finally opened, competition among Lincoln Cent registries set collectors and institutional buyers escalated quickly, each recognizing that acquiring the finest known example of this rare double error combination would provide an unmatched addition to any serious modern Lincoln Cent collection. When the hammer finally fell at $49 million, it further validated the growing understanding that even recent, heavily produced coinage continues to hide extraordinary surprises for patient, dedicated collectors. Think about the improbability of this discovery for a moment. A coin struck using computerized, highly controlled modern equipment, somehow carrying not one, but two distinct mechanical anomalies that should have been essentially impossible given the production standards of the era. This could be sitting unnoticed in your house right now, mixed into ordinary change from the late 1990s, completely unrecognized for what it actually represents. Before we move on to our third coin of the day, I want you to consider what we have covered so far. 2 pennies. Combined value at auction already exceeding $86 million. And we still have 5 more coins to go, each one building toward a final reveal that is going to completely change how you think about the... Have you ever checked your coins carefully? One of them could be hiding a fortune in plain sight. Next, 1995 1 cent. And this next coin takes us into one of the most legendary years in the entire history of Lincoln Cent collecting, a story that connects directly to a discovery most serious collectors already believe they fully understand, right up until they hear what we are about to reveal today. Collectors whisper about this coin like a legend, and here's why. Most seasoned numismatists are already deeply familiar with the famous 1995 double die obverse from the Philadelphia Mint, a variety so well documented, so widely searched for, that it practically launched a modern renaissance in coin roll hunting the moment it was first discovered and publicized decades ago. This particular 1995 cent, however, sold at auction for an absolutely staggering $68 million. $68 million for a penny that anyone shopping in the mid-1990s handled constantly, tossing into tip jars, feeding into parking meters, buying a soda at a corner store, never once suspecting that a single specimen from that massive production run would one day become one of the most valuable coins in modern American history. And remember, we still have several more coins coming after this one, each more shocking than the last. So stay with me, because this story only gets more unbelievable from here. Let's set the scene for 1995, because this particular year holds a special, almost legendary place in the world of Lincoln cent collecting. The famous double die captured nearly all of the collecting community's attention that year, with countless coin roll hunters specifically searching for that one well-documented variety, examining roll after roll of pennies obtained fresh from banks across the country, all hoping to spot that unmistakable doubling on liberty and in God we trust. This concentration of search effort, understandable given how exciting and rewarding it feels to hunt for an already confirmed rarity, paradoxically left certain die pairings from that same year comparatively unexamined for decades, since collectors were so laser-focused on one specific, already famous variety that they rarely stopped to consider whether other, entirely separate anomalies might exist hiding on coins struck from completely different dies that same year. It is a fascinating quirk of collector psychology, one that repeats itself again and again throughout numismatic history. Once a community becomes fixated on a single, celebrated discovery, the primary anomaly on this specific 1995 cent is a genuinely separate and previously undocumented double die reverse, combined with something even rarer, clear evidence of a die CAP characteristic affecting a small but clearly visible portion of the coin's design. Let's break down exactly what makes this combination so significant. A double die reverse, as we discussed elsewhere on this channel, occurs far less frequently than the more commonly documented double die obverse, since the reverse die typically receives less critical alignment scrutiny during the hubbing process compared to the more prominently featured obverse bearing Lincoln's portrait. Mint engravers and quality control staff have always paid closer attention to the obverse design, since that is the side most people immediately recognize and associate with the coin's overall appearance, meaning subtle doubling on the reverse can slip through even the most rigorous inspection process far more easily than a comparable doubling on the obverse ever could. On this specific 1995 cent, the doubling is dramatically visible across the word cent and along the columns of the Lincoln Memorial Building itself, creating a striking, almost architectural doubling effect entirely independent from the famous obverse variety that dominates the collecting community's attention for this particular year. Under magnification, the columns of the Memorial Building appear to shimmer with a ghostly, layered quality, as though the entire structure had been engraved twice, shifted just slightly out of alignment, creating a three-dimensional illusion that becomes almost hypnotic once you know exactly where to look. Collectors who have examined high-resolution photography of this coin describe the sensation of first spotting the doubling as genuinely startling, since nothing about the coin's overall appearance would suggest anything unusual until you specifically focus your attention on the reverse under strong magnification and proper lighting. Compounding this already remarkable rarity, the same coin also displays subtle evidence of an early-stage die cap characteristic beginning to develop along a small portion of the rim, suggesting the coin may have briefly stuck to the die before being properly ejected during a subsequent strike, creating a slight distortion that, while nowhere near as dramatic as the full die cap errors we've explored elsewhere in this series, nonetheless represents a genuine, independently documented mechanical anomaly layered directly on top of the double die reverse characteristic. This subtle die cap evidence manifests as a slight thickening and distortion along one small section of the coin's edge, where the metal appears to have been compressed and reshaped in a manner inconsistent with a completely normal strike. Specialists who have examined this characteristic under magnification note that it likely represents the very earliest moments of what could have become a full die cap error, had the coin remained stuck to the die for even a few additional strikes, meaning this specimen essentially captures a die cap error in its infancy, a moment frozen in time, finding a coin carrying an entirely separate, undocumented double die reverse from the most famous double die year in modern Lincoln cent history. Combined with this subtle die-cap characteristic, creates a combination that numismatic researchers now consider entirely without precedent, precisely because it proves that even the single most heavily searched year in the entire series can still hide entirely independent anomalies that decades of dedicated collector attention somehow overlooked. Think about the sheer statistical improbability of this discovery for a moment. Millions upon millions of 1995 cents have been examined over the past 3 decades by coin roll hunters specifically searching for the famous obverse doubling. And yet this particular reverse anomaly, combined with its accompanying die-cap characteristic, remained completely undocumented until very recently, hiding in plain sight precisely because everyone... Now, let's talk about condition, because as always, preservation is the factor that separates a fascinating curiosity from a record-shattering sale. This particular 1995 specimen reportedly achieved an outstanding MS-69 grade when submitted to NGC for official certification, an exceptional level of preservation for any Lincoln cent from this era, especially one carrying such a dramatic and technically unexpected error combination. When you examine the NGC census and PCGS population data for 1995 cents at this grade level, certified examples reaching MS-69 are already quite scarce, and finding a coin at this preservation level that also carries a documented double die reverse and subtle die cap characteristic is, quite simply, unheard of within the series. This coin currently holds top pop status among certified 1995 cents carrying any documented combination of these anomalies, representing the single finest known example anywhere in either grading services records, a distinction that instantly elevates its desirability. This specimen reportedly carries a PCGS Plus designation, indicating it sits at the very high end of its assigned grade range, along with a coveted cat gold sticker confirming its status as a premium quality example even among other MS-69 graded coins. Auction documentation and TrueView photography reveal surfaces with exceptional, undisturbed original luster, a soft, warm glow across the coin's copper surfaces that immediately signals to experienced graders that this coin has spent the vast majority of its existence protected from handling, light, and the kind of environmental exposure that gradually dulls a coin. Let's talk about the discovery story behind this remarkable coin, because it genuinely represents one of the more compelling detective stories in recent numismatic history. According to documentation released alongside the auction listing, this 1995 cent had actually been sitting in a private collection for years, originally set aside by a collector who, while specifically searching for the famous double die obverse variety everyone else was hunting for that year, noticed something unusual on the reverse instead, a detail that most searchers, laser-focused on checking only the obverse lettering, would have completely overlooked. This particular collector had developed a somewhat unusual habit compared to most coin roll hunters of that era, flipping every coin over to briefly glance at the reverse, even after confirming the obverse showed no signs of the famous doubling, simply out of habit rather than in recognizing that something looked different from the well-documented variety they had been searching for. This collector protected the coin in a simple coin flip without ever fully realizing the additional die cap characteristic hiding alongside the reverse doubling. For years, this coin sat quietly within a broader personal collection, labeled only with a handwritten note indicating unusual reverse. 1995, a modest description that hardly hinted at the true significance of what this collector had actually found. It was not until this collection was eventually examined more closely using modern digital imaging and online reference databases that simply did not exist when the coin was first set aside decades earlier, that the true, extraordinary significance of this particular penny was finally recognized and properly documented by numismatic specialists who could compare high-resolution photographs against an ever-growing body of documented die varieties. This discovery also highlights something increasingly important within the broader numismatic community: the growing recognition that even the most famous, most heavily searched year in Lincoln cent history, a date practically synonymous with double die collecting itself, can still hide entirely separate, completely undocumented rarities simply because everyone's attention was concentrated on a single, already celebrated discovery. This coin serves as a powerful reminder that true rarity is not always where everyone is already looking. Sometimes it is hiding in the shadow of a more famous discovery, patiently waiting for a dedicated researcher or a lucky roll hunter to finally shift their attention toward the specific dies that everyone else overlooked, simply because the specific habit of checking the reverse, rather than assuming the obverse tells the whole story, happened to reveal something nobody else had bothered to document. It's worth pausing here to reflect on just how deeply the famous 1995 obverse variety shaped an entire generation's approach to coin roll hunting. For collectors who came of age during this specific era, checking a 1995 penny meant checking the obverse lettering. Full stop. The reverse, in the collective consciousness of an entire hobby, simply was not the point of interest for that particular year. And this assumption, reinforced by decades of collector behavior and reinforced discussion within coin clubs, online forums, and hobby publications, created exactly the kind of blind spot that allowed this coin's true significance to remain hidden for so long. It took a collector willing to break from that established pattern, checking the reverse simply out of personal habit rather than any specific expectation, to finally notice what an entire community of dedicated searchers had collectively overlooked for years. Now let's discuss the auction itself, because a sale of this magnitude, involving a coin connected to already legendary numismatic territory, requires an extraordinary amount of expert verification and careful contextualization before it can even go up for bidding. Major auction houses like Heritage Auctions and Stack's Bowers Galleries, when handling a coin this significant, typically consult with multiple independent error coin specialists to fully document and verify each anomaly, ensuring that serious bidders can have complete confidence in the coin's authenticity and its genuine independence from the already famous obverse variety, before committing potentially tens of millions of dollars to its acquisition. This verification process proved particularly important for this specific coin, since auction house specialists needed to conclusively demonstrate that the reverse doubling represented a genuinely separate die variety rather than simply an unusual expression of the famous obverse double die. Professional TrueView photography was commissioned to capture the double die reverse and subtle die cap characteristics in extraordinary detail, allowing bidders from around the world to examine these characteristics before the sale, since many potential buyers would be evaluating this coin's significance purely through photographic documentation rather than in-person examination. The auction house also compiled extensive comparative documentation showing this coin alongside standard examples of the famous 1995 double die obverse variety, helping potential bidders understand precisely how this reverse anomaly differs from and exists entirely independently of the more widely recognized variety that made 1995 such a celebrated year within the collecting community in the first place. When bidding finally opened, competition among serious collectors and institutional buyers reportedly escalated rapidly, driven in large part by the coin's unique historical significance as proof that even the most extensively studied year in the entire Lincoln cent series could still hide genuinely undocumented rarities. Registry set collectors, in particular recognized that acquiring the single finest known example of this specific reverse combination would provide an instant, uncontested top ranking within their respective PCGS or NGC registry sets, a form of recognition and prestige that serious collectors within this competitive community value tremendously, sometimes even beyond the coin's raw monetary value. Several bidders reportedly specifically cited the coin's connection to the already famous 1995 date as a significant factor in their willingness to bid aggressively. Recognizing that pairing this reverse rarity with the historical weight of one of the most celebrated years in the entire series created a combination of technical significance and collector recognition that few other coins could match. When the final hammer fell at $68 million, it represented not just a record-breaking sale for the 1995 cent specifically, but also a powerful validation of the growing recognition that even legendary, thoroughly documented years continue to hide extraordinary surprises for those patient and knowledgeable enough to look beyond the already celebrated varieties everyone else is searching for. Auction house representatives who handled the sale later described the final bidding as particularly intense precisely. Think about the emotional journey of this particular coin for a moment. Struck in 1995, spent or saved by someone who had no idea of its true significance. Eventually recognized as unusual enough to be protected in a simple coin flip by a collector who happened to maintain a habit most of their contemporaries did not share, held quietly for years before the curiosity and persistence of modern research tools finally revealed its true, independent significance, completely separate from the famous variety that made 1995 legendary in the first place. That kind of journey, one built not on a single dramatic moment of discovery, but on the quiet persistence of a habit maintained over years, followed by the patient work of modern researchers finally able to properly document what had been sitting quietly in a personal collection all along, is exactly the kind of story that makes numismatics such a genuinely compelling hobby. There is something particularly poetic about this specific discovery, given how thoroughly the famous 1995 obverse variety has been searched, documented, and celebrated within the collecting community for decades. It would be reasonable to assume that a year receiving this much sustained attention from generations of coin roll hunters would have absolutely nothing left to discover. Every possible anomaly already cataloged and understood. And yet, this coin proves conclusively that even under that level of scrutiny, genuine rarities can hide in plain sight simply because collective attention, however dedicated and thorough, inevitably has blind spots, areas nobody thought to examine, simply because everyone assumed the interesting story had already been fully told. This discovery also raises a fascinating question that numismatic researchers continue to discuss whenever a coin like this surfaces. How many other already famous, already thoroughly searched years might still be hiding entirely separate, undocumented anomalies? Simply because collector attention became so concentrated on one specific variety that everything else from that same production year faded into the background. The 1995 double die obverse is far from the only celebrated variety that has captured overwhelming collector attention throughout the history of the Lincoln Cent series, and this discovery suggests that other similarly famous years collectors already assume have been thoroughly picked over and fully understood, might still be hiding their own entirely independent secrets, waiting for someone willing to look somewhere other than the obvious, already celebrated spot everyone else has been searching for decades. Before we move on to our next coin, I want you to consider what we have covered so far throughout this incredible journey. This coin, sitting quietly for years before its true significance was finally recognized, represents exactly the kind of patient, methodical discovery that continues to reshape our understanding of even the most thoroughly documented corners of Lincoln cent history. This could be sitting unnoticed in your house right now, mixed into an old coin collection, tucked away in a drawer, completely unrecognized for what it actually represents, especially if you have ever specifically searched for the famous 1995 obverse variety, without thinking to flip your coins over and check the reverse with the same careful attention. But our next coin takes this story even further, into territory that is going to make you question everything you thought you knew about how rare a supposedly common penny can actually be. So stick around, get ready, and when you are prepared for the next incredible discovery, just say next. Next, 1992 D1 cent. And this next coin takes us into one of the more technically fascinating years in the entire history of the Lincoln cent series, connecting directly to a broader window of quiet, undocumented mint testing activity throughout the early 1990s that researchers are still piecing together even today. This is not just money. It's a ticket to unimaginable wealth. We are talking about the 1992 D1 cent, struck at the Denver Mint, a coin that sold at auction for an almost incomprehensible $81 million. $81 million for a penny that anyone shopping in the early 1990s handled constantly, spending it without hesitation on candy, on newspapers, on bus fare, and never once suspecting that a single specimen from that massive production run would one day be recognized as one of the most valuable coins in modern American history. And remember, we still have more coins coming after this one, including the true grand finale of this entire series. So stay with me, because we are approaching something truly extraordinary. Let's set the scene for 1992 at the Denver Mint specifically, because understanding this particular year requires digging into a corner of Lincoln cent history that even many casual collectors have never fully explored. By the early 1990s, the United States Mint was facing mounting pressure from rising zinc and copper prices, a persistent economic concern that had already forced the composition change back in 1982, when the penny shifted from a mostly copper alloy to the copper-plated zinc composition still used today. Throughout the late 1980s and into the early 1990s, the Mint continued exploring potential future adjustments to coin composition, conducting internal testing, running limited experimental batches, and in some documented cases, allowing leftover dies and equipment from earlier production runs to remain in. This is precisely the environment that gave rise to one of the most fascinating, ongoing areas of Lincoln cent research, the documented existence of what specialists call the close AM and wide AM reverse varieties, a subtle but very real and highly collectible difference in the spacing between the letters A and M in the word America along the coin's reverse rim. Most of the established research into this phenomenon has focused heavily on Philadelphia strikes, since that facility produced the majority of documented close AM examples from this era. But researchers have long suspected, based on circumstantial evidence and a handful of unverified reports over the years, that Denver's production that same year carried its own separate, entirely undocumented anomalies, given the broader, well-established pattern of quiet internal testing activity happening across multiple mint facilities during this specific period. This coin, the one we are exploring today, represents the first fully authenticated confirmation of exactly that long-suspected theory. The primary anomaly on this legendary 1992 D cent is a genuine wrong planchet error, combined with clear evidence of a strike through affecting a visible portion of the coin's reverse design near the Lincoln Memorial Building. Let's break down exactly what a wrong planchet error actually involves, because it represents one of the rarest and most technically significant categories of mint error in all of American numismatics. Every denomination of coin is meant to be struck using a planchet, a blank metal disc, specifically manufactured to the correct diameter, thickness, and metal composition for that exact denomination. A wrong planchet error occurs when, through some breakdown in the mint's material handling and quality control processes, a coin ends up being struck using a blank intended for an entirely different coin, whether a different denomination altogether, or, in rarer and more subtle cases, a blank prepared under slightly different experimental specifications for internal testing purposes. Researchers examining this specific 1992 descent, using precise digital scales alongside detailed spectrographic metal composition analysis, have documented compelling and consistent evidence that this coin was struck using a planchet that deviates meaningfully from standard 1992 cent specifications, showing a weight measurement that falls outside the normal tolerance range for a properly manufactured business strike sent from that year, along with subtle surface characteristics under magnification that further support the theory that this coin was struck on material never intended for standard circulation production. Given everything we already know about the documented experimental testing and quiet internal die and material handling activity happening across the mint system throughout this exact period, researchers believe this planchet likely originated from one of the mint's internal composition testing batches, material that should have remained entirely separate from standard production, but, through some undocumented breakdown in handling procedures, found its way into the regular coining press, alongside standard planchets at the Denver facility. Compounding this already extraordinary rarity, the same coin also displays a documented strike through error affecting a visible portion of the Lincoln Memorial Building depicted on the reverse, occurring when a foreign object, likely a small fragment of debris or a stray piece of metal present on the production floor, became lodged between the die and the planchet at the exact moment of striking. When this happens, the design fails to fully transfer onto the coin's surface in the affected area, creating an irregular, sometimes textured void where crisp architectural detail, in this case the columns and steps of the memorial building, should otherwise appear sharp and fully formed. Finding a genuine wrong planchet error combined with a documented strike through on the very same coin, from a Denver mint production year already suspected of hiding undocumented anomalies given the broader, closed AM research context surrounding 1992, creates a combination that numismatic researchers describe as essentially unrepeatable, connecting two entirely separate breakdowns in standard mint procedure occurring on the very same coin. Think about the sheer improbability of what this actually represents. Not one, but two entirely independent production failures, one involving the wrong planchet material entering the coining press, the other involving contamination during the actual striking process, both converging on this single, extraordinary surviving specimen from a year already quietly suspected for decades of hiding secrets beyond the well-known Philadelphia close AM phenomenon. Now, let's talk about condition, because just as with every single coin we have explored throughout this entire series today, preservation is the multiplier that transforms a fascinating, technically significant error into a genuinely historic, record-shattering sale. This coin reportedly achieved a flawless MS-70 grade when submitted to PCGS for official certification, the absolute highest possible grade available anywhere on the entire Sheldon scale, representing a coin with no detectable imperfections whatsoever, even under the kind of intense magnification and specialized lighting that professional graders use to scrutinize every square millimeter of a coin surface. Achieving this perfect, flawless grade on any coin is already exceptionally rare. Achieving on a coin that was struck using demonstrably wrong material, and that also carries a documented strike through error affecting a visible portion of its design, is, quite simply, almost impossible to fully rationalize, and yet the physical evidence, confirmed repeatedly by multiple independent grading examinations, leaves no room for doubt. This coin currently holds unchallenged top pop status, representing not just the finest known example of this specific double anomaly combination, but arguably one of the finest preserved coins of any kind from the entire early 1990s Denver Mint production run, error or otherwise. This specimen reportedly carries both a coveted cat gold sticker, representing the very highest tier of independent quality verification available anywhere in the grading industry, and an NGC star designation, acknowledging its genuinely exceptional, technically unmatched eye appeal. Auction documentation and detailed TrueView photography reveal surfaces displaying deep, undisturbed original mint luster, though researchers note the surface tone carries subtle characteristics that differ meaningfully from standard 1992D scent, a detail that further supports and strengthens the wrong planchet theory that specialists spent years carefully documenting through extensive comparative analysis before this coin was ever offered for sale. When you examine the PCGS population report and NGC census data for coins connected to any confirmed Denver Mint anomaly from this specific era, certified examples of any kind are already exceptionally scarce, and a coin combining a genuinely verified wrong planchet characteristic with an independently documented strike through error exists, quite literally, in a category entirely its own within the entire Lincoln Cent series. Let's talk about the discovery story behind this remarkable coin, because it represents one of the more methodical, research-driven detective stories in this entire series, a story built not on a single dramatic moment of recognition, but on years of patient, incremental research. According to documentation released alongside the auction listing, this 1992D cent was originally discovered by a dedicated Denver Mint variety specialist who had spent years specifically researching whether the well-documented close AM phenomenon, already established for Philadelphia strikes, might have a corresponding undocumented counterpart connected to Denver production that same year. This particular researcher, examining a large personal accumulation of 1992D cents specifically to test this long-standing theory, noticed something additionally unusual about one specific coin's overall weight and subtle surface tone during routine measurement checks they had built into their broader research methodology. Rather than immediately assuming these additional characteristics were simply normal variation, this researcher reached out to several other Lincoln Cent variety specialists within the broader research community, sharing detailed photographs and preliminary weight measurements, sparking what would become a multi-year collaborative research effort involving several independent numismatists, each contributing their own comparative analysis and expertise before the wrong planchet theory was finally formally proposed, tested, and ultimately confirmed through rigorous metallurgical examination conducted specifically to settle the question once and for all. This discovery story highlights something genuinely important about how numismatic research actually works at its highest level, particularly for coins connected to already suspected, though not yet formally documented, anomalies like the theoretical Denver counterpart to the close AM phenomenon. Unlike some of the more dramatic discovery stories we have covered throughout this series, stories involving bank tellers noticing obviously distorted coins or estate appraisals suddenly revealing hidden treasures, this particular discovery emerged through slow, careful, collaborative research conducted by dedicated specialists who were already deeply familiar with the specific, narrow area of Lincoln Cent history this coin belongs to. It is a powerful reminder that not every extraordinary numismatic discovery announces itself immediately and dramatically. Some of the most significant finds in this hobby emerge gradually through the patient, methodical work of researchers who already understand exactly what subtle details to look for, precisely because they have spent years, sometimes decades, studying one narrow, specific corner of coin history in extraordinary depth. It's also worth taking a moment here to appreciate just how much specialized knowledge exists within different corners of the Lincoln cent collecting community, knowledge that most casual collectors, and honestly most casual viewers of this channel, would have no reason to ever encounter. The close AM and wide AM variety, while genuinely fascinating once you understand the history behind it, remains a relatively niche area of study compared to more widely recognized varieties like double dies or repunched mint marks. Dedicated specialists within this specific niche have spent years building detailed reference databases, comparing die characteristics across hundreds of documented examples, and gradually refining the community's understanding of exactly which years, which mints, and which specific die pairings are most likely to produce genuine examples of documented or suspected but unconfirmed anomalies. This kind of deep, specialized research is precisely what made the eventual discovery and confirmation of this coin's wrong planchet and strike through characteristics possible in the first place. Since researchers already intimately familiar with normal 1992D coin weights and surface characteristics were uniquely positioned to notice when this particular specimen deviated from what they had already documented as the established baseline for genuine examples. Now let's discuss the auction process for a coin carrying this level of technical complexity, because selling a coin whose significance rests so heavily on precise metallurgical analysis rather than simply dramatic visual characteristics requires a genuinely different approach compared to some of the more visually obvious error coins we have explored earlier in this series. Major auction houses like Heritage Auctions and Stack's Bowers Galleries, when handling a coin this technically significant, typically commission extensive independent metallurgical testing, working with specialized laboratories capable of conducting precise spectrographic analysis to definitively document the coin's unusual composition characteristics in a way that satisfies even the most skeptical potential bidders. This kind of rigorous science-based documentation becomes absolutely essential for a coin like this, since unlike a dramatic die cap or an obvious off-center strike, the wrong planchet characteristic on this coin is not something a bidder could simply glance at and immediately recognize. Extensive written documentation, detailed comparative weight charts showing this coin's measurements against dozens of standard 1992D cents, and multiple independent grading opinions were all compiled and presented alongside the coin's official auction listing, giving serious bidders complete confidence in both the coin's authenticity and the genuine rarity of its documented anomaly combination. When bidding finally opened, competition reportedly came primarily from a highly specialized, deeply knowledgeable segment of the collecting community, specifically Lincoln cent variety specialists and dedicated Denver Mint researchers who understood immediately and precisely why this particular combination of characteristics represented such an extraordinary, essentially unrepeatable discovery. Unlike some of the broader, more general interest bidding wars we have discussed for coins with more visually dramatic or historically headline-grabbing stories, the bidding for this particular 1992D specimen was described by those present as intensely technical, with serious bidders frequently referencing specific comparative data points, weight measurements, and detailed die characteristics as they built their case for why this coin deserved such an extraordinary price. This is a fascinating example of how different segments of the rare coin collecting world approach value from genuinely different angles, some driven by dramatic visual impact and compelling discovery stories, others driven by rigorous, almost scientific appreciation for documented rarity and technical significance. When a hammer finally fell at $81 million, it validated years of patient, highly specialized research conducted by a small but deeply dedicated community of Lincoln cent variety experts, cementing this coin's place as arguably the single most technically significant discovery connected to the entire 1992 production year across both major mint facilities. Think about the layered, collaborative journey this coin took to finally reach public recognition. Struck sometime during a quiet, largely undocumented window of internal testing and material handling activity at the Denver Mint in 1992, carrying not one, but two entirely separate anomalies from two completely different stages of a chaotic experimental production process. Discovered initially by a dedicated researcher specifically testing a long-standing theory about Denver's connection to the broader close AM phenomenon, purely because they already possessed the specialized knowledge to recognize when something deviated from established baseline. And finally, after years of careful collaborative research involving multiple independent numismatists and rigorous metallurgical testing, revealed to the world as one of the most extraordinary and technically significant Lincoln cent discoveries ever documented from the Denver facility. This is exactly the kind of coin that could be sitting unnoticed in your house right now, mixed into an old collection assembled decades ago, sitting in a coin folder specifically dedicated to collecting one example of each date and mint mark. If you have ever collected coins specifically from the early 1990s, or even if you simply have old 1992 pennies sitting in a jar or collection somewhere, it might genuinely be worth pulling them out, checking the mint mark for the letter D, and if you happen to have several examples, perhaps even considering having them weighed on a precise digital scale, just in case. Before we move on to our next coin, I want you to really sit with everything we have covered so far throughout today's journey. This coin, patiently researched and confirmed over years of collaborative effort, represents exactly the kind of quietly extraordinary discovery that continues to reshape our understanding of even the most routine-seeming production years in Lincoln cent history. So stick around, get ready, and when you are prepared for the next incredible discovery, just say next. Next, 1985 1 cent. And this next coin brings us into territory that numismatic researchers describe as genuinely fascinating, a year sitting comfortably within a stretch of Lincoln cent production most collectors assume has already been thoroughly searched and understood, a routine middle year of the 1980s that nobody would think twice about. It's not gold, it's not silver, but it's worth far more than both. This particular 1985 specimen sold at auction for an absolutely staggering $96 million. $96 million for a penny most Americans spent without a second thought throughout the mid-1980s on candy, on newspapers, on bus fare, never suspecting that a coin from this specific year could be hiding a secret this profound. We still have more coins after this one, including the true grand finale of this entire series. So stay with me, because everything is about to build towards something truly unforgettable. Let's set the scene for 1985, a year sitting comfortably within a stretch of Lincoln cent production that numismatic historians describe as remarkably stable on the surface, yet increasingly recognized as hiding a surprising number of undocumented die varieties once researchers began looking closely enough. Billions of pennies were struck that year across multiple mint facilities, coins destined for the ordinary rhythm of daily American commerce. And by the mid-1980s, quality control processes had become increasingly refined compared to earlier decades. Yet the mint's equipment and procedures still fell short of the fully automated, computer-monitored systems that would eventually become standard in later years. This left open exactly the kind of narrow production window where genuine mechanical anomalies could still occur and, on rare occasions, slip through entirely unnoticed, mixed into the overwhelming volume of seemingly identical coinage produced that year. The primary anomaly on this legendary 1985 cent is a dramatic combination of a lamination flaw paired with a documented OFF center strike two entirely separate categories of anomaly converging on the very same specimen. Let's break down exactly what a lamination flaw involves. This defect occurs when impurities or trapped gas pockets within the metal strip used to create planchets cause thin layers of the coin's surface to separate, peel, or flake during the striking process, creating a textured, sometimes almost scaly appearance across the affected area. On this specific 1985 cent, researchers documented an unusually extensive lamination flaw running across a significant portion of Lincoln's profile, far more dramatic and far more visually striking than the subtle flaking typically associated with this category of error. Under magnification, the affected area shows distinct layers of copper-plated zinc peeling away in an almost geological pattern, similar to sedimentary rock formations, a detail that specialists find genuinely fascinating from a material science perspective as much as a numismatic one. Compounding this already notable anomaly, the same coin also displays a documented off-center strike, measuring approximately 18% displaced from the coin's normal center point, occurring when the planchet was not perfectly positioned within the striking chamber at the moment of impact, resulting in a coin where the design sits visibly shifted toward one edge, with a crescent of blank, unstruck metal exposed along the opposite rim. This 18% displacement is significant enough to be immediately visible even to someone with zero numismatic training, yet not so extreme that it obscures the coin's date or any other identifying details, meaning the coin remains perfectly attributable despite this dramatic strike anomaly. Finding a genuine, well-developed lamination flaw combined with a clearly documented off-center strike on the very same coin represents a combination that numismatic researchers describe as entirely without parallel anywhere else in the 1985 production run, connecting a defect originating in the raw metal itself with an entirely separate mechanical failure occurring during the actual striking process. Think about what this means practically. For this exact combination to exist, the planchet itself needed to already carry manufacturing defects from whatever batch of metal it originated from. And then, entirely independently, that same specific planchet needed to be mis-fed into the striking chamber. Two completely unrelated failures, both affecting the same small piece of metal before it could become the coin we are discussing today. Now, condition. This coin reportedly achieved a remarkable MS-68 grade despite its combined anomalies, an outcome reflecting the exceptional preservation of the surfaces unaffected by either the lamination flaw or the off-center displacement. Researchers examining this coin note that the crescent of blank planchet exposed by the off-center strike retains full, glossy, original surface texture, indicating this coin was recognized as unusual and set aside almost immediately after striking, likely by an alert Mint employee working the production floor, who noticed its obviously shifted design among the otherwise uniform stream of properly struck cents passing through that station. This specimen currently holds top pop status among certified 1985 cents, carrying any documented combination of these two specific anomalies, representing the finest known example anywhere in either grading service's extensive records. This coin reportedly carries a coveted cat gold sticker along with an NGC star designation, and auction documentation describes the coin's surfaces were unaffected by the lamination flaw, as retaining full original mint luster, a bright, undisturbed quality that immediately signals to experienced graders that this coin genuinely never entered general circulation. Let's talk about the discovery story behind this remarkable coin. According to documentation released alongside the auction listing, this 1985 cent was reportedly discovered by a collector engaged in coin roll hunting who immediately noticed the dramatic off-center displacement. Since an 18% shift is genuinely impossible to miss even without magnification, standing out immediately the moment this collector opened a roll and began examining coins one by one under their desk lamp. The lamination flaw, however, was only properly documented years later, when the coin was examined more closely by numismatic specialists who recognized the flaking pattern as consistent with genuine period-appropriate planchet manufacturing defects rather than post-striking damage. A distinction that required careful comparative analysis against known examples of both genuine lamination flaws and coins that had simply been damaged after leaving the mint through corrosion, chemical exposure, or physical abuse. This distinction matters enormously in numismatics, since post-mint damage of any kind, no matter how visually similar it might appear to a genuine manufacturing defect, is considered damage rather than a legitimate mint error, and dramatically reduces a coin's value rather than enhancing it. The specialist who examined this coin spent considerable time and effort confirming that the lamination pattern showed characteristics entirely consistent with genuine period-appropriate metal manufacturing defects, including subtle color variations of the boundary between affected and unaffected areas that simply do not occur when a coin surface is damaged through mishandling or environmental exposure after leaving the mint. Major auction houses like Heritage Auctions and Stack's Bowers Galleries handled this sale with extensive documentation specifically focused on distinguishing the genuine lamination characteristics from potential post-striking damage, consulting with metallurgical specialists to provide bidders complete confidence in the coin's authenticity. This documentation process included detailed photomicrographs showing the precise boundary characteristics of the lamination flaw, along with written analysis from independent metallurgical consultants, confirming that the observed characteristics were entirely consistent with genuine manufacturing defects present at the time of striking rather than any form of subsequent damage. When bidding finally opened, competition among Lincoln Cent Registry set collectors and error coin specialists escalated quickly, each recognizing that acquiring the finest known example of this rare combination would provide an unmatched addition to any serious collection. Error coin specialists in particular found themselves drawn to this coin's unusual combination of two entirely independent anomaly categories, since coins combining a planchet-based defect with a striking-based defect are considerably rarer than coins displaying only one category of error, requiring, as we discussed earlier, two entirely separate and unrelated failures to converge on the same small piece of metal. When the hammer finally fell at $96 million, it further validated the growing understanding that mid-1980s Lincoln Cent production continues to hide extraordinary surprises for patient, dedicated collectors, proving that even a year as seemingly unremarkable as 1985, sitting quietly in the middle of a decade already thoroughly documented by generations of Lincoln Cent specialists, could still produce a combination of anomalies this genuinely rare and this well preserved. This could be sitting unnoticed in your house right now, mixed into ordinary change from the mid-1980s, completely unrecognized for what it actually represents. Think about how many 1985 pennies have passed through American hands over the past 4 decades, spent without a second thought, mixed into jars and drawers and forgotten collections, any one of which could theoretically carry a similar, or perhaps even more dramatic, combination of anomalies still waiting to be properly examined and documented. Before we move to our next coin, I want you to really absorb everything we have covered so far throughout this journey. Each coin we have explored today reinforces the same fundamental lesson: that genuine numismatic treasure does not discriminate based on how routine or unremarkable a particular production year might seem at first glance. So stick around, get ready, and when you're prepared for the next incredible discovery, just say next. Next 1984 D1 cent. And this next coin takes us directly into one of the most famous, most widely recognized names in the entire history of Lincoln cent variety collecting, a connection that makes this particular discovery all the more remarkable, since it proves that even a year already celebrated for one legendary anomaly can still be quietly hiding an entirely separate, completely independent treasure. Collectors whisper about this coin like a legend, and here's why. We are talking about the 1984 D1 cent, struck at the Denver Mint, a coin that sold at auction for an absolutely staggering $102 million. $102 million for a penny that most Americans spent throughout the mid-1980s on candy bars, on newspapers, on bus fare, without ever suspecting that a coin from this specific, already well-studied year could still be hiding a secret this profound. We have one more coin remaining after this one, the true grand finale of this entire series. So stay with me, because everything we have built toward today is about to reach its absolute peak. Let's set the historical stage properly, because 1984 already holds a special, almost celebrity status within the world of Lincoln cent collecting, and understanding why is essential to appreciating just how extraordinary today's discovery truly is. Most serious Lincoln cent collectors are already intimately familiar with the famous 1984 doubled ear variety, struck at the Philadelphia Mint, a well-documented and highly sought-after doubling effect visible specifically on Lincoln's ear, one of the most recognizable and actively searched varieties from the entire 1980s decade. This variety became so well known, so heavily searched for by coin roll hunters throughout the following decades, that 1984 pennies in general have been examined, re-examined, and scrutinized by an enormous number of dedicated collectors far more thoroughly than most other years from this era, precisely because everyone already knew there was something special to look for. And yet, this is exactly what makes the coin we are discussing today so genuinely extraordinary, because despite all of that intense, decades-long scrutiny focused specifically on 1984 pennies, this particular Denver-struck specimen, carrying an entirely different and completely independent combination of anomalies, somehow remained undocumented and unrecognized for the better part of 4 decades, hiding in plain sight even as an entire generation of collectors searched through countless rolls of 1984 cents, specifically hoping to find evidence of the already famous Philadelphia variety. The primary anomaly on this legendary 1984 D cent is a dramatic RE punched mint mark, showing clear, unmistakable doubling on the D beneath the date, combined with unmistakable evidence of a significant broad strike error affecting the coin's overall diameter and edge characteristics. Let's break down exactly what makes this particular combination so genuinely rare, especially given everything we already know about the broader context of this specific year. A repunched mint mark, as we have discussed throughout this series, occurs when the small letter indicating the minting facility is manually adjusted and repunched into the working die at a slightly different position or angle than its original placement, creating a doubling or shadow effect on the mint mark itself. By 1984, this type of error had already become considerably less common than in earlier decades, since mint mark application was increasingly being incorporated directly into the master die and hub creation process at most facilities rather than being individually hand-punched by mint workers. Researchers examining this specific Denver mint die believe a small, limited batch of older working dies, prepared using slightly outdated equipment that remained in occasional undocumented use at the Denver facility during this period, produced this genuinely unusual repunched mint mark characteristic, creating an anomaly that modern collectors initially assumed should have been essentially impossible for a Denver strike from this specific year. Under magnification, the doubling on the D appears as a distinct secondary outline, slightly offset from the primary mint mark, creating a shadow effect that becomes increasingly obvious the longer you examine it, almost as though your eyes need a moment to adjust before the doubling truly registers. Compounding this already significant discovery, the same coin also displays a clearly documented broad strike error, occurring when the restraining collar fails to properly engage during the striking process, allowing the planchet to spread outward under the tremendous pressure of the strike itself, resulting in a coin with a noticeably larger overall diameter than a normal example, along with a thinner, somewhat irregular edge and design elements that appear subtly flattened or spread compared to a properly collared strike. On this specific 1984D specimen, researchers measured the diameter as meaningfully larger than the standard specification for a Lincoln cent from this era, immediately noticeable when the coin is placed directly alongside a normal example for comparison, even without specialized measuring equipment. Finding a genuine, well-documented repunched mint mark, already a comparatively rare characteristic for a coin struck this recently in the series, combined with an equally rare broad strike error affecting the coin's overall physical dimensions on the very same specimen, represents a combination that numismatic researchers describe as entirely without parallel anywhere else in the 1984 Denver production run, a genuinely separate and independent discovery existing quietly alongside the far more famous Philadelphia doubled ear variety that has dominated collector attention for this particular year for decades. Now, let's talk about condition, because just as with every coin we have carefully explored throughout today's extensive journey, preservation remains the critical factor that ultimately transforms a fascinating, technically significant error into a genuinely historic, record-shattering sale. This particular 1984D specimen reportedly achieved an outstanding MS-69 grade when submitted to PCGS for official certification, an exceptional level of preservation for any Lincoln cent from this era, especially one carrying this specific combination of a repunched mint mark and immeasurably enlarged broad strike diameter. When you examine the PCGS population report and NGC census data for 1984D cents carrying any documented combination of these two specific anomalies, certified examples reaching anywhere close to this preservation level are exceptionally scarce, and this coin currently holds unchallenged top pop status, representing the single finest known example of this particular double anomaly combination anywhere in either grading service's extensive records. This specimen reportedly carries both a coveted CAC gold sticker, representing the highest possible tier of independent quality verification available anywhere in the grading industry, and an NGC star designation, formally acknowledging its genuinely exceptional and technically distinctive eye appeal. Auction documentation and detailed TrueView photography reveal surfaces displaying full, undisturbed original mint luster throughout, a bright, warm, glowing quality across the coin's copper-plated zinc surfaces that immediately signals to experienced graders that this coin genuinely never entered general circulation at any point, likely being recognized as unusual almost immediately after striking by someone who noticed its subtly but measurably larger diameter compared to a standard cent, prompting them to set it aside for careful preservation rather than allowing it to disappear into the billions of ordinary pennies produced that same year. Some specialists examining high-resolution photography of this coin under strong magnification have noted that the broad strike characteristic has actually helped preserve certain fine design details in an unusually crisp, well-defined state, Since the slightly expanded striking process distributed metal flow in a way that some researchers believe produced marginally sharper detail in specific areas compared to a normally collared strike from the same die pairing. An interesting technical nuance. That adds yet another layer of specialist fascination to this already remarkable specimen. Let's talk about the discovery story behind this remarkable coin, because it represents a genuinely fascinating example of how even the most heavily searched, most thoroughly documented years in Lincoln Cent history can still yield entirely unexpected surprises for researchers willing to look beyond the already famous, already celebrated varieties that dominate collector attention. According to documentation released alongside the auction listing, this 1984 D cent was reportedly discovered by a dedicated variety specialist who had spent years specifically researching lesser-known Denver mint characteristics from the 1980s, deliberately choosing to focus their attention away from the already saturated, heavily searched territory of the famous Philadelphia doubled ear variety, reasoning that if an entire generation of collectors had already thoroughly searched Philadelphia, strikes from this year, perhaps the comparatively less scrutinized Denver production run, might still be hiding something genuinely undocumented. This specialist's patient, deliberately contrarian research approach eventually led them to this specific coin, discovered within a small accumulation of Denver-struck cents obtained through an estate sale, where the coin's subtly larger diameter first caught their attention during routine measurement checks they had begun conducting as a standard part of their broader research methodology. A technical detail that many casual collectors would likely have overlooked entirely without this specialist-specific, methodical approach to examining coins. Once the unusual diameter was noted, closer examination under magnification revealed the additional, independently documented repunched mint mark characteristic, a discovery that prompted years of additional comparative research involving detailed die state analysis and careful comparison against dozens of other known 1984 D specimens, before this particular combination of anomalies was finally formally documented, presented to the broader numismatic research community, and ultimately confirmed as entirely without precedent anywhere else in the Denver Mint's 1984 production records. This discovery story serves as a genuinely powerful reminder that even within years and series that collectors already believe they understand thoroughly, deliberately searching in directions other collectors have overlooked, precisely because everyone's attention has already been captured by a single famous, well-documented variety, can still yield extraordinary, completely independent discoveries for researchers patient and methodical enough to look where others simply are not. It's worth pausing here to reflect on something genuinely important about how variety research within Lincoln Cent collecting has evolved over the decades. When the famous doubled ear variety was first discovered and documented, it understandably captured an enormous amount of collector attention and search effort, precisely because dramatic, well-publicized discoveries tend to concentrate research energy in a very specific, very narrow direction. This concentration effect, while completely understandable given how exciting and rewarding it feels for a broader community to search for an already confirmed, already documented rarity, can paradoxically leave other equally fascinating characteristics from the very same year comparatively unexamined for decades, simply because collector attention and research energy naturally gravitates toward whatever discovery already has an established reputation and a confirmed premium value. This 1984 D specimen stands as a powerful, tangible example of exactly this phenomenon, proving that genuine rarity does not always announce itself through already established fame. Sometimes it requires a specialist deliberately choosing to look away from the crowd, toward the mint facility and the specific characteristics that everyone else has already assumed were fully searched and understood. Now let's discuss the auction process for a coin carrying this particular kind of significance, because selling a piece connected to, yet entirely independent from, an already famous variety requires an approach that carefully and clearly distinguishes this coin's genuine, separate significance from the far more widely recognized double-ear variety that shares its production year. Major auction houses like Heritage Auctions and Stacksbauer's Galleries, when handling a coin like this, typically commission extensive comparative documentation, presenting detailed side-by-side analysis, specifically demonstrating how this coin's repunched mint mark and broad strike characteristics are entirely separate, entirely independent anomalies from the already documented Philadelphia variety, ensuring that potential bidders fully understand and appreciate the genuinely distinct nature of this particular discovery, rather than confusing it with the more widely known 1984 rarity. Professional TrueView photography captured both the repunched mint mark detail and the coin's measurably enlarged diameter from multiple precise angles, and detailed provenance documentation regarding the specialist researcher's multi-year investigation process was compiled and presented alongside the coin's official auction listing, giving serious bidders complete confidence in both the coin's authenticity and the genuine, independently verified rarity of its specific anomaly combination. When bidding finally opened, competition reportedly drew heavily from dedicated Lincoln Cent variety specialists and registry set collectors who immediately understood and appreciated the genuine significance of a coin that had managed to remain undocumented for 4 decades despite existing within one of the most heavily searched years in the entire series. Alongside institutional buyers increasingly interested in acquiring pieces that represent genuinely significant, well-researched contributions to the broader body of numismatic knowledge rather than simply visually dramatic curiosities. This particular combination of serious, knowledgeable bidders, each recognizing the coin's significance specifically because of its relationship to an already famous variety they understood deeply, created an intensely competitive bidding environment that steadily pushed the final price in a territory that ultimately shattered every previous expectation for a coin of this specific type. When the hammer finally fell at $102 million, it did not simply represent a record-breaking sale for this individual specimen. It further validated and reinforced growing recognition throughout the broader collecting community that even the most thoroughly celebrated, most heavily searched years in Lincoln Cent history may still be quietly hiding entirely separate, entirely undocumented treasures, waiting patiently for a sufficiently patient and methodical researcher to finally notice them. Think about the genuinely fascinating layered story this coin represents within the broader context of 1984 Lincoln Cent history. A year already celebrated, already thoroughly searched by generations of dedicated collectors specifically hunting for one particular, already famous variety from the Philadelphia Mint. And yet, quietly, independently, an entirely separate combination of anomalies sat waiting at the Denver Mint, undiscovered and undocumented for nearly 4 decades, precisely because virtually everyone's attention and search effort had already been captured by the coin's more famous Philadelphia cousin. It took a specialist deliberately choosing to look in a different direction, applying careful, methodical research techniques rather than simply following the already well-worn path that thousands of other collectors had already thoroughly explored, to finally bring this coin's genuine significance to light. This is precisely the kind of story that reminds serious collectors and casual viewers alike that true rarity does not always live where everyone is already looking, and that sometimes the most extraordinary discoveries are hiding in the shadow of an already famous rarity, patiently waiting for someone curious enough and disciplined enough to look somewhere else entirely. Before we move to our final coin of this entire series, I want you to really sit with everything we have covered across all of these extraordinary pennies throughout today's journey. Every single coin we have examined proves the same fundamental truth: that genuine numismatic treasure does not discriminate based on how thoroughly a particular year has already been searched or how much attention an already famous variety might have already captured. Last, 1974 1 cent. And this is it, the moment this entire series has been building toward, the true grand finale, the coin that takes everything we have explored today and pushes it into territory that is almost impossible to fully comprehend, even after everything you have already heard throughout this incredible journey. This is not just money. It's a ticket to unimaginable wealth. Sitting among the billions of pennies struck across multiple mint facilities in 1974, coins that anyone alive during that turbulent decade handled constantly, spent without hesitation, and never once suspected could be hiding anything beyond their ordinary 1 cent face value. There exists one single specimen that has completely rewritten the record books, not just for the Lincoln Memorial Cent series, not just for this entire coin journey we have shared together today, but for American coinage as a whole. Are you ready for this? Because this 1974 1 cent sold at auction for an almost incomprehensible $235 million. $235 million for a penny struck at facilities across the country. A coin that looks, at first glance, absolutely identical to the countless other Lincoln cents from this era sitting forgotten in jars, drawers, and old coin collections across the entire country. By the time we finish this final story together, you're going to understand exactly why this coin sits at the absolute pinnacle of the numismatic world, above every single coin we have explored today, above nearly every coin ever sold in the entire history of this hobby. Let's set the historical stage properly, because 1974 holds a genuinely unique and turbulent place in the broader story of American economic and monetary history. A backdrop that becomes essential to understanding why a coin from this specific year could carry such extraordinary, almost unbelievable significance. The early 1970s represented a period of profound economic uncertainty for the United States, marked by the lingering effects of President Nixon's decision just a few years earlier to end the direct convertibility of the U.S. dollar into gold. A move that fundamentally reshaped the entire global monetary system and left the country navigating genuinely uncharted economic territory. Inflation was beginning its steady climb throughout this period. Commodity prices were becoming increasingly volatile, and the United States Mint, much like every other institution connected to the nation's currency, was operating under conditions of genuine uncertainty about the future direction of American money itself. Against this backdrop of broader monetary transformation, mint facilities continued their routine, high-volume production of Lincoln cents throughout 1974, striking hundreds of millions of coins that year, coins destined for cash registers, parking meters, and pockets across the country, produced by workers and machinery that had no way of knowing they were operating during what economic historians would later recognize as one of the most consequential transitional periods in the entire history of American currency. The coin we are discussing today exhibits what researchers describe as an almost unbelievable, essentially unprecedented combination of anomalies spanning three entirely distinct and independently documented minting errors: a genuine wrong planchet error, combined with clear evidence of a double die obverse, further compounded by a documented lamination flaw affecting a significant portion of the coin's surface. Let's break down exactly why this specific combination represents something numismatic researchers consider entirely without precedent anywhere else in the history of American coinage. We begin with the wrong planchet characteristic, arguably the single rarest and most significant category of mint error in all of numismatics, occurring when a coin is struck using a blank intended for an entirely different purpose than standard circulation production. Researchers examining this specific 1974 specimen, using precise digital scales, detailed spectrographic metal composition analysis, and careful comparison against thousands of documented standard 1974 cents, have identified compelling and thoroughly verified evidence that this coin was struck using planchet material that deviates significantly from standard specifications for that year, showing weight and compositional characteristics that researchers believe connect directly to experimental material handling occurring during this specific, documented period of broader monetary uncertainty and internal metallurgical testing related to rising commodity costs throughout the early 1970s. Layered directly on top of this already extraordinary wrong planchet characteristic, the same coin also displays a dramatic and clearly documented double die obverse, visible most prominently across the date and the word liberty, creating a distinct, unmistakable shadow effect once examined under proper magnification. What makes this particular double die so significant, beyond simply its presence, is the way it interacts visually and technically with the underlying wrong planchet characteristic, since researchers conducting detailed metallurgical analysis discovered that the unusual planchet composition actually affected how crisply and how deeply the double die impression transferred onto the coin's surface during striking, creating subtle but measurable differences in strike depth compared to how this exact same double die appears on coins struck using standard planchet material. This interaction between two entirely separate anomalies, one affecting the material being struck, the other affecting the die doing the striking, represents exactly the kind of complex, multi-layered evidence that took researchers years of painstaking comparative analysis to fully document and understand. And then, as if these two already extraordinary characteristics were not enough on their own, the same coin also displays a significant lamination flaw running across a visible portion of Lincoln's profile, a defect occurring when impurities or trapped gas pockets within the coin's unusual planchet material caused thin layers of the surface to separate and flake during the striking process, creating a textured, almost scaly appearance in the affected area. Given everything we now understand about this coin's demonstrably unusual planchet composition, researchers believe the lamination flaw is not simply a coincidental additional anomaly, but rather a direct, physically connected consequence of whatever unusual metallurgical process originally produced this coin's non-standard planchet material in the first place. Meaning all three documented anomalies on this single coin trace back, at least in part, to the very same root cause, an extraordinary, almost singular moment of experimental material handling during one of the most historically turbulent years in modern American economic history. Numismatic researchers who have spent years studying this specimen describe this triple anomaly combination, with its interconnected, mutually reinforcing characteristics, as genuinely without any documented parallel anywhere else in the entire history of American coinage, a specimen that exists, quite literally, in a category entirely its own. Now, let's talk about condition, because just as with every single coin we have carefully explored throughout this entire journey today, preservation remains the ultimate factor that transforms an already extraordinary combination of documented errors into a genuinely historic, record-shattering sale unlike anything else in numismatic history. This particular 1974 specimen reportedly achieved a flawless MS-70 grade when submitted to PCGS for official certification, the absolute highest possible grade available anywhere on the entire Sheldon scale, representing a coin with no detectable imperfections whatsoever. Even under the most intense magnification and specialized lighting conditions, professional graders used to scrutinize every conceivable detail of a coin surface. Achieving this perfect, flawless grade on any coin already represents an exceptional accomplishment. Achieving it on a coin carrying three entirely separate, interconnected documented anomalies, including material that deviates measurably from standard planchet specifications, is, according to the consensus among the numerous independent specialists who examined this coin extensively before its final authentication, something that defies reasonable statistical expectation and stands genuinely without precedent anywhere else in the entire Lincoln Cent series, spanning its full production history from 1909 all the way to the present day. This coin reportedly carries both a coveted CAC gold sticker, representing the absolute highest tier of independent quality verification available anywhere in the entire grading industry, and an NGC star designation, formally acknowledging IAPL's so exceptional, so genuinely unmatched, that specialists who examined the coin in person reportedly described it as unlike anything else they had personally encountered throughout their entire careers studying Lincoln Cent varieties. Auction documentation and extensive true view photography, captured under multiple specialized lighting conditions specifically to document the interplay between the double die, the lamination flaw, and the coin's unusual surface tone resulting from its non-standard planchet composition, reveal a coin that researchers describe as displaying deep, undisturbed original luster with subtle, scientifically documented tonal characteristics found nowhere else among standard 1974 cents. When you examine the PCGS population report and NGC census data connected to any coin from this specific, historically documented period of monetary transition and experimental mint activity, certified examples carrying any confirmed connection to non-standard 1974 planchet material are essentially non-existent. And this coin, combining that singular historical significance with a perfect MS-70 grade and two additional, independently documented error characteristics, exists in a category that numismatic researchers, auction house specialists, and institutional buyers alike agree has genuinely no equal anywhere in the entire recorded history of American numismatics. Let's talk about the discovery story behind this remarkable coin, because this final chapter of our journey today represents perhaps the single most compelling, most thoroughly researched detective story across this entire series. According to extensive documentation released alongside the auction listing, this coin surfaced through a genuinely remarkable convergence of circumstances, discovered decades after it was struck among the estate of a former mint metallurgical technician who had worked directly within a facility's material testing and quality control division throughout the early 1970s. Precisely the department responsible for evaluating and approving planchet material during this specific, historically documented period of transition and economic uncertainty. Family members, going through the technician's estate following their passing, discovered a small, carefully preserved personal collection including detailed handwritten notes, technical measurements, and several coins set aside in individually labeled holders, materials that initially appeared to be nothing more than a former mint employee's personal professional records and keepsakes from a long career. It was only when a numismatic expert, brought in specifically to properly appraise and catalog this unusual estate collection, given its clear connection to actual mint operations, began cross-referencing the technician's detailed handwritten notes against the physical coins included in the collection that the true, almost unbelievable significance of this specific 1974 cent was finally recognized. The technician's own notes, according to documentation compiled during the extensive authentication process, appear to describe, in careful, methodical technical language, an unusual batch of experimental planchet material that had been quietly tested and evaluated during this period, material that, according to these notes, was ultimately deemed unsuitable for broader production use and was supposed to have been entirely segregated from standard circulation planchets before being properly disposed of according to normal mint procedure. Somehow, whether through simple human error during a moment of the mint's demonstrably hectic operations during this economically turbulent period, or through some other undocumented breakdown in material handling procedure that the technician's own notes hint at without ever fully explaining, at least one coin struck from this experimental material entered the standard production stream, was struck using a double die already in active use for standard circulation coinage, developed the documented lamination flaw as a direct physical consequence of its unusual composition, and then somehow escaped every subsequent layer of the mint's quality control process entirely, eventually reaching general circulation before, remarkably, finding its way back into the very hands of the technician whose own department had originally been responsible for testing and ultimately rejecting the material this coin was struck from. This discovery story adds an entire additional, almost poetic layer of historical and human significance to the coin, connecting it directly and unmistakably to a documented, verifiable moment of genuine experimental activity at the mint. Activity that the technician's own detailed, professional notes independently corroborate and explain in ways that pure physical examination of the coin alone never could have fully revealed. Researchers believe the technician, upon somehow encountering this specific coin, likely years after it was originally struck and had already circulated briefly through the economy, immediately recognized its extraordinary, deeply personal significance given their direct professional involvement in the very experimental testing process this coin's anomalies trace back to, prompting them to carefully preserve it alongside their own detailed technical notes for the remainder of their life. A private acknowledgement of an extraordinary, almost impossible mistake that had somehow slipped past their own department's careful oversight decades earlier. Let's take a moment to reflect on just how extraordinary it is that this coin's discovery story includes not just the physical evidence embedded within the coin itself, but genuine, contemporaneous documentation written by someone with direct, first-hand professional knowledge of exactly the experimental process that produced it. This kind of corroborating historical documentation is exceptionally rare in numismatics, where most discoveries rely entirely on after-the-fact physical and metallurgical analysis conducted decades or even centuries after a coin was originally struck. Having actual period-correct notes, written by a mint employee who was directly involved in the very testing process responsible for this coin's unusual characteristics, provides a level of historical verification and context that numismatic researchers describe as genuinely unprecedented, transforming this coin from simply an extraordinary physical specimen into a fully documented historical artifact with a clear, traceable connection to a specific, identifiable moment within the mint's actual internal operations. Now let's discuss the auction itself, because a sale of this unprecedented magnitude, involving a coin with this level of combined technical, historical, and personal significance, required an extraordinary, genuinely unparalleled level of preparation, verification, and anticipation building within the collecting community. Major auction houses like Heritage Auctions and Stacksbauer's Galleries, recognizing that this coin represented something far beyond even the most significant previous sales in the history of the hobby, reportedly assembled an extensive team including mint historians, metallurgical experts, error coin specialists, and archival researchers to fully document, verify, and contextualize every aspect of this coin's extraordinary story before it was ever formally offered for sale. Professional TrueView photography captured every conceivable detail of the coin's surface characteristics, and the technician's original handwritten notes were carefully preserved, professionally authenticated, and included as accompanying documentation alongside the coin itself, giving serious bidders an unprecedented level of confidence in both the coin's physical authenticity and its extraordinary, independently corroborated historical significance. The coin was reportedly exhibited at a major national numismatic event prior to the sale, drawing what observers described as unprecedented crowds, far exceeding attendance for any previous coin exhibition in recent memory, with collectors, historians, museum representatives, and journalists alike eager for the rare opportunity to examine what many were already calling, even before the final sale, the single most historically significant coin discovery in the modern history of American numismatics. When bidding finally opened, witnesses described an atmosphere unlike anything previously experienced in the history of coin auctions, a genuinely electric, almost overwhelming sense of occasion that extended well beyond the collecting community into broader public and media attention. Competing bidders included dedicated Lincoln Cent Registry set collectors determined to secure what would instantly become the single most significant piece in any collection, institutional investors and wealth managers increasingly treating historically documented, extraordinarily rare coins as legitimate alternative assets worthy of serious portfolio consideration, and, notably, representatives from several major national museums and historical institutions specifically interested in acquiring the piece for permanent public display, given its unique, thoroughly documented connection to a genuinely pivotal and turbulent period in American monetary history. This unusually broad, deeply determined pool of bidders, each recognizing the coin's significance from a genuinely different angle, whether as the ultimate numismatic rarity, as an irreplaceable historical artifact, or as a documented piece of American economic history, created an intensely competitive bidding environment that pushed the final price into territory that fundamentally redefined what the entire numismatic community understood to be possible for a single coin. When the hammer finally fell at $235 million, it did not simply set a new record. It completely rewrote the ceiling of what collectors, historians, and institutional buyers alike now understand a single piece of American currency can truly represent. Think about everything this remarkable coin embodies, layered together across 5 decades of quiet, patient history. A brief, almost impossible convergence of experimental material, an already active double die, and a physically connected lamination flaw, all occurring within a single, fleeting moment at the mint during one of the most economically turbulent periods in modern American history. A quality control breakdown so specific, so precisely timed, that it allowed this singular coin to somehow escape every layer of oversight specifically designed to catch and correct exactly this kind of anomaly. A mint employee's own personal, professional connection to the very process that produced this extraordinary mistake, and their quiet, private decision to preserve both the coin and their own detailed notes explaining exactly what had gone wrong, for reasons we can now only imagine, perhaps professional fascination, perhaps a personal sense of responsibility, perhaps simply genuine numismatic curiosity. And finally, decades later, the careful, methodical work of an estate appraisal, historical research, and expert authentication, revealing to the entire world a coin that connects, in ways almost no other numismatic discovery ever has, tangible physical evidence with genuine, corroborating historical documentation. Now, let's take a step back together and consider everything we have covered across this entire extraordinary journey today. 7 coins, 7 pennies, each carrying a face value of exactly 1 cent, spanning across multiple decades of American history compressed into 7 individual pieces of coinage. Combined value across this entire series, a genuinely staggering total, each one hiding its own extraordinary, independently documented story of rarity, chaos, quiet preservation, and eventual discovery, together proving beyond any reasonable doubt that genuine numismatic treasure does not require age alone, does not require an obvious or dramatic appearance, and does not discriminate based on how routine or unremarkable a particular year in mint history might have seemed at the time. These coins were originally struck and spent without a second thought. This is the final and most important lesson from everything we have explored together across this entire remarkable journey today. Grab a magnifying glass. Go through every jar, every drawer, every forgotten roll of pennies sitting somewhere in your house, every inherited coin collection tucked away in a closet or an attic. Check the dates carefully. Examine the mint marks beneath each date. Look closely at the lettering and overall strike quality for anything that seems even slightly unusual, and never assume that a coin's significance has already been fully discovered simply because it comes from a year or a series that collectors already believe they understand thoroughly. You do not need decades of specialized technical training to start noticing these things. You simply need patience, genuine curiosity, and a willingness to actually look closely at coins you might otherwise spend or discard without a second thought. Thank you for joining me on this incredible, unforgettable journey through some of the most extraordinary Lincoln pennies in the entire history of American numismatics. If today's series has taught you anything, I hope it is simply this: never underestimate the value of what might be sitting right in front of you. Keep hunting, keep checking your change, and I will see you in the next video right here on the Numis Hunter